Easter to you. I really believe God saved the best for last. I hope you believe that, because this is our other sunrise service right here. All you late sunrise service people here, yes, it is good to be with you today. And now that you're getting comfortable, whether you're sitting in this room, whether you're out in our chapel, out in our cafe, or maybe even up in our zebra lounge, I want you to turn to the people next to you and say, Happy Easter, Happy Easter. Come on, tell them. I don't know about you, but that it's interesting that we call Easter happy. When you know the details of what happened that Easter weekend, it's kind of the opposite of happy if you really get down to it. And yet we even call Friday good. But if you know the details of what happened on that Friday, good? Are you with me? Now I realize we kind of are removed from that moment in time, and we see the impact. We see the effect that it's had, and sure, it's good. Sure, it's happy now, but if you really go back to the original Easter, come on, the original Easter, there wasn't happiness. Come on, the original Easter wasn't bunnies in baskets and plastic grass. The original Easter wasn't ham. Come on, they were Jewish, right? It wasn't about deviled eggs. It's kind of evolved over time. Not that those things are bad, but the original Easter was more about death, sorrow, and uncertainty. Maybe that's a little bit more relatable today to someone's life here this morning. And when you think about what they were hoping for then, and maybe how that got disrupted because of Good Friday, maybe we can get a little bit more understanding this morning about Easter. Because if you think about being a follower of Jesus in that day that he got crucified, what were they believing? Come on. We had hoped that Jesus was the one and he was going to make a difference. We had hoped that he was going to be the Messiah. We had hoped that he was going to push back Rome. We hoped that he was going to become our next king of Israel. We thought this movement was about to happen. And instead of it happening, he ends up getting killed on a cross. And Good Friday is where he got accused and whipped and crucified. And we watched our leader die on the cross. And along with our leader, our dreams and our hopes and our future, it died on that cross too. If you're a follower of Jesus, the sky went black and Friday ends, and you're left waking up on Saturday going, what in the world just happened? The movement is over. Where do we go now? What do we do now? And all of a sudden, that's really what's happening in Easter. Are you with me? And it's like in that moment, they wake up defeated, disappointed, and even depressed. Doesn't sound happy to me, does it you? And yet, what we want to do this morning is we want to look back, and what I appreciate about the Bible is that the writers then, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, all give us some risen accounts of Jesus. They tell us what happened on that Easter weekend. And they each tell different stories to give us different angles in the story. But what I want us to do today is get beyond even the disciples, beyond the 11 that are still remaining. And I want us to get a little wider and look at some of the greater followers that were following too. And we're going to pick up in a story about two men that on Easter morning decide to go ahead and go on back home. If you have your Bibles, turn with me to Luke chapter 24 as we look at these two men that find themselves on the road of home going back to the way of Emmaus. Now, what they do here, I don't think is unfamiliar to you and me. Matter of fact, when defeat and devastation falls on your life and my life, we all want to run back to something familiar, don't we? Come on, relate to that today. And familiar for them is we just got to go home, right? I wonder how many of you, when you feel defeated at work, you're just like, I just can't wait to get home. And not just get home, I want to get in my room, and better yet, I want to get in my bed. There's just something about comfort in your own bed going, man, everything can be falling apart. I just need to know I'm in my covers in my own bed. You know what? Sometimes running back to home for me is running to Ben and Jerry's, come on, and eating the whole court all in one sitting, right? It's like I just want to feel something again, even if it ends up being nauseous later, right? Or I just want to go and get Netflix on, and I'm going to watch the whole season all in one sitting, and I'm going to sit in the same clothes for days, right, watching it. episode after episode. I just wanna find something to distract, right? Many times, you know what we run to? Oftentimes, we'll start to text, we'll go online, we'll reach out to someone that we have no business reaching back to in our past. And oftentimes, when we're hurting or we're overwhelmed, we just want to run. We just want to run. Well, guess what? That's what these two guys are doing. They got their backs to Jerusalem, and they're running home. That's what we're going to pick up in this story. Come on, look at this. Luke 24, verse 13. It says this, "Now on the same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus. It's about a 7-mile journey from Jerusalem. They were talking to each other about everything that had happened." Can you imagine the conversation, how that went that day when they're recounting what they witnessed on Friday all the way to this day? But it said that's what they were doing. They were talking to each other. And as they were discussing these things to each other, Jesus himself comes up and walks alongside with them. But they were kept from recognizing him. Now, this is interesting because when Jesus was alive, he had already predicted what was supposed to happen. He told them, "I'm going to be crucified." He told them this. He said, "Wait and watch. 3 days later, I'm going to rise from the dead." He told them this. And then he said, "Stay in Jerusalem because I'm going to send somebody even greater than me that's going to come and help guide you." That's the promise for the future. Yet here you get these two guys. They know this. It's Sunday, and they're not going to stick around and wait. They got their backs to Jerusalem. They're walking home, and not just their backs to Jerusalem, but let's just go ahead and say it. They got their backs to God, and they got their backs to God's promises, and they're just going to go find familiar. Now, we would say this way, even though these guys have been followers of Jesus, these guys were lost, and maybe they don't even know it. Maybe they don't even know it. Well, hey, my name is Pastor Todd. I am one of the pastors here, and I want to welcome you to our Easter services. So glad you're here. And this guy lurking next to me right now, it's a little awkward. No, this guy's Pastor Andrew, and we have been experimenting something all weekend. I just felt like before we got here, this service today needed 2 preachers. Come on, it needed 2 preachers today to preach Easter. And so we're trying something here. If it didn't work, don't tell us till it's over, all right? But I just felt like there's something about this story. 2 men going home to Emmaus that it needed 2 preachers today. Another reason is this dude, not only is he good looking, he's a good preacher. And I felt like today I needed to say something as we cast some vision for where God's leading our church. And what a Sunday to cast vision than on Easter Sunday is to say that we're one church in 2 locations. And next Sunday, we're beginning something brand new that Andrew's going to be leading. And today, Andrew, tell us about what's going to happen next Sunday.
Yeah, that's right. Starting next Sunday, the launch team is going to be launching our Fredericksburg campus. Is going to start meeting at the Leland Station Clubhouse at 9:30 a.m. We believe that God's calling us to go down to Fredericksburg to plant the next campus of Mount Ararat to produce meaningful relationships, but also to make a difference in that community. So I want to challenge you and encourage you, if you have a Fredericksburg zip code, even if you're watching online today from Fredericksburg, that you would join us on this ground level as we look to build this launch team that will launch the next campus. And the cool thing is that I've been telling people that, we may be scaled down because we're going to gather around and watch the service together. We're going to have kids programming as we grow this launch team. We may be scaled down, but we're going to be spirited up. Right. And so we're ready to see what God's going to do in us as we take a step to make a difference in that community. In fact, we're believing that he's going to do exceedingly more than we can hope or imagine as we take steps to reach Fredericksburg.
It's good. It's exciting. We'd love for you to join us. Well, hey, man, since I got you up here today, let's do this. Everybody grows up with Easter traditions, and you probably did in your family. Come on, how many of you here today, wherever you're sitting on campus, how many of you had Easter traditions, right? And here's the thing. If you're a parent, probably what happens is this. Things that you did as a kid or your spouse did as a kid, you're now replicating that with your kids, all these years removed. Come on, if you were up here closer, you could still see the stain on my hands. We colored eggs on Friday because that's something I did growing up, and that's something we still do. Listen, my kids are a lot older than younger kids, but my 21-year-old couldn't wait to get home to color her dozen of eggs this year. You see, that's tradition. That's some things that we do every single year. Think about the family you grew up in. In my house, you know what happened on Easter morning? You would go out in the main room and magically appearing, all 3 baskets, one for me, one for my older sister, one for my younger sister, would be in the front room, right? An Easter basket. In that Easter basket had chocolate, it had candied eggs, and it also had jelly beans. And then right next to the basket, I used to get some clothes for like summer or spring, a bathing suit, something like that. And then I'd have some dress clothes. And we weren't, listen, I'll tell you this, we weren't church people, but every Easter we dressed up. Yeah. Don't laugh. Every Easter we dressed up and we went to church. And so here's my memories. I'll just go ahead and confess this. I connected church with wearing shoes that hurt your feet. I was like, church, I don't want to go to church, right? But that's kind of what it was. And after church, we would come home, and magically, there's these eggs all over the backyard. And after our ham dinner, deviled egg dinner, right? Well, that was when I was really young. But hey, listen, we would go out and search for eggs, and you had to outrun your siblings, right, to get as many eggs. And you wanted to find that plastic egg that actually had money in the egg. Come on. Are you with me? That was the tradition in my house. That's what we grew up with in my family. So that's some of the things we've passed on. Yeah. What about you, Andrew? You got any Easter traditions?
Oh, yeah. Let me just say, first of all, you were pretty fly for a white guy in those pictures up there, so. But, I don't know. Like, we didn't have some of the normal American Easter traditions. I don't know. Maybe that's because my family immigrated from Jamaica. So we did Easter probably a little bit differently. But there was a couple things that we did do. And we were the same thing where we pretty much went to church primarily 2 times a year. We made sure we went on Christmas, and we made sure we went on Easter. I can always remember when Easter was approaching, one of the things my mom always did every year is that she would take us kids to JCPenney's, because we had to get our Easter suits for that year. In fact, I think I have a picture too right there. Yeah, that's me on the left right there. Yeah, look at that little Denzel Washington up there looking all good.
How come you got ahs and I got right?
Hey.
Come on.
Yeah.
Last hour, show me some love, man.
Not necessary. You did have way more hair back then anyway. So, yeah, don't show this shot right here. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, so Easter. So every single year during Easter, we would make sure we get dressed up. And I can remember we would go to church, and depending on who was off, like my parents would work on the weekend. So sometimes, depending on who was off, we would go to church with my mom. And, we would go to church with my mom. She went to this Baptist church. I always remember the choir every single Easter. If my dad was off, we would go with him to this Episcopalian church that he was a part of. Now, there's one thing I remember about that Episcopalian church was that every single year, there was some point on Easter during the service where everyone stood up, they came down front, and they all drank out of this communal communion cup. Now, let me just get something off my chest this Easter. That was disgusting. Because Sister Susie just getting over the flu, some kid is backwashing in that thing, and the priest is wiping it with the cloth. There ain't no Clorox wipe, that ain't doing nothing. And so back to Easter tradition. So we would get dressed up every year. We would make sure we go to church, and usually at some point we'd have some type of lamb dinner or something like that on Easter.
So today, lamb on the schedule for you?
No, not at all. So.
Yeah, you got young kids. Mac and cheese is probably there.
Exactly.
Well, listen, these 2 men are traveling to a place of Emmaus. They're on a road. And as I was thinking about this weekend and the economy of God and who would all be here and who would be on our campus and even watching online, the reality is that we're all on a road. And maybe that road is leading us to God, or maybe that road is leading us away from God. And to get a little bit more specific, because I think we all are maybe on some different levels of the road right now. Maybe there's somebody here, and I love that we have a lot of teenagers in the room. Maybe you're on the road and you're about to graduate from high school. And maybe you're in the last few months before you walk across that stage, get your diploma. And as you look out to what's next, you're excited, but maybe you're a little bit nervous too. And as you're trying to believe and think about what could be, you're on that road of making some decisions that could change the trajectory of your life. But maybe you're here today and you're on the road, you've already been to high school, you've already been to college, and now you're in your first job, and you're on the road to that first job, and you're hoping that job lives up to the expectations that you put on it. And as you're on that road, maybe you're here and you just joined the military and you're in your first duty station called Quantico, and you're here and you're on that road of beginning. But somebody right across the aisle is probably on that road about to retire. And they're on that road of retirement, probably asking, where did the time go? I can't believe I'm already here. And then maybe you're there going, now I've got a whole set of questions to ask. What am I gonna do next? What am I gonna do now? Many of you might be on the road of being a single adult in this room. And as you're on that road of being a single adult, you know what? Maybe you're looking for meaningful relationships. You want to be a part of a community of people that you can believe in and that will believe in you and will help you to connect and help you to grow in your life, maybe even grow in your faith. And maybe you're on the road of a single adult and you're looking for that significant person that you want to make a commitment to, that you can step forward into in the future. Maybe you're on a pathway and you're married and you're discovering again that marriage and love, they're dynamic, they're moving. And I hope that no matter how many years you've been married, that you're willing to keep growing in that love relationship with the one that you're with, and that God's gonna continue to lead you there. Yet I know that maybe some of you might be married and your marriage took a turn this last year that you didn't expect. And now you find yourself on a whole nother road that you didn't plan for, and it's a dark road, and you're wondering, are we gonna make it? Or maybe the road took another turn already and you're already on that road of divorce. You know, maybe you're a parent here today and you're on the road of parenting. I would add the exhausting road of parenting, right? It's tough. It's tough being unconditional in your love and your direction and your leading and your guidance, and knowing your kids are pushing against that because they're naturally supposed to become independent, and you're leading them and you want the best for them. And if you're on the road of parenting, you're probably also on the road of financial stress, right? Because it's expensive raising kids. And yet this morning I've met some people that their job took a turn for the worst and they're on a road of going, man, what next? And that can create emotion as well. Maybe you're on the road in this last year of loss. Man, I've known that road this last year too. What a difference this last year has meant in my life and in my faith. But maybe you're just beginning that road and it's dark right now because of the sorrow and the loss that you're experiencing. Maybe you're here today as a senior adult and you're excited because your family is here today, but they're going to drive away in a few days and you feel that aloneness when they're gone. You'll see, what road are we on? These two guys, they've been devastated and they're now on a road of going back to familiar, to go back home. And the irony is this: Jesus shows up on their road and they don't even recognize him. They don't even see him.
You know, there's something about this story, and there is a weight and a heaviness to this story. But at the same time, we're hoping that you'll see the hope in it, but also that if you don't think God has a sense of humor, you're going to see it today here in this story. In fact, let's back up to verse 15 and look at what it says here. It says, as they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. You know, Pastor Todd, people will debate as to whether or not what was the reason why these guys didn't recognize Jesus. You know, some scholars will say it's because Jesus was in this resurrected body. I mean, he was crucified, he was buried, and he rose from the dead, and he was in this resurrected body. So because he looked differently, they couldn't see Jesus. And some other scholars will say too, it's because they were so defeated, because they were so discouraged, and because of the way they felt, that they couldn't see that Jesus was right next to them. Now, spoiler alert, Jesus does reveal himself to them later on in the passage, but for right now, right here in this story, for whatever reason, something is blocking them from seeing Jesus. So before we continue on the road with these two guys, I want to ask you the question: what is blocking you from seeing Jesus? Because there's something that he wants to reveal to you today. And see, we forget that Jesus was a real person who really did live a little bit over 2,000 years ago and walk here on earth. We forget that Jesus was a real person who really did make these claims. Like, he so loved the world, he so loved you, that he was willing to give up his life for you so that you could find forgiveness, so that you could find hope, so that you could find life to the full for eternity. You know, we even forget that the guy who's writing this, Luke, he was a real person. And he was actually recording eyewitness accounts, not some made up fairy tales, but he was recording eyewitness accounts of real men, these two guys who were on the road who did witness the resurrected Jesus. In fact, we know from historians like Josephus that Luke was a doctor in the first century. In fact, even though he's a doctor, as you read this story, there's so much detail that he gives us. Even the distance, 7 miles from this one city to the next. And I think Luke, as this doctor recording these eyewitness accounts and giving us so much detail, he doesn't want anything to stop us from seeing Jesus. So don't miss him today. But listen how the story continues on here in verse 17. Jesus asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. And one of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" And it's crazy. And this is, I think, the humorous side of God. These guys start telling Jesus about Jesus. I see the crazy thing is that right here in this moment, Jesus can be like, "Look, guys, it's me, okay? It's me. I'm Jesus." But he just kind of goes along with it. And see, there's something that Jesus wants to pull out of these two. And he wants to pull out of us today. And in fact, we believe that right here in this passage, there's 3 things that Jesus wants to reveal to us on this Easter. So the first one is, whether you're looking for Jesus or not, he is looking for you. Whether you've been in search of him or not, he is looking for you. These two guys, they were not only not looking for Jesus, but they actually weren't even expecting Jesus. In fact, if you read any of the gospel accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, of when Jesus rose from the dead, none of his followers actually thought he would really rise from the dead. In fact, it literally was a surprise to them. In fact, none of his followers were outside the tomb early Sunday morning doing a countdown, saying 10, 9, 8, come on, Todd, he's about to come out, 6, 5. Like no one was out there counting down, waiting for Jesus to come out because no one expected him to come out. They thought when Jesus died, that hope had died and that this was over. So not only were they not looking for him, but they weren't even expecting him. But this story shows us that even though they weren't doing that, Jesus was pursuing them and he was looking out for them. In fact, look how the story continues here in verse 19. "What things?" Jesus asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the 3rd day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see Jesus."
They didn't see. They didn't see. And we could ask the question removed from this and say, how could they miss him? How could they not see him? And I would say it's the same reason why many of us don't see. You see, they had an expectation of what they believed and how it was supposed to happen, and it didn't match up. Their reality didn't match up with what they expected. And because it didn't, they didn't see. We see it right here in this verse 21. It said that we had hoped. And isn't that really revealing to us what they believed to be true? We had hoped. We had hoped. We had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. But that hope is gone now. When I think about what Cleopas and this disciple on this road, what happened, it's the reality that a lot of times what happens for us is that sometimes what we hope for, when it's not a reality, it leads us to walk away from God versus walking back to God. Yeah. And that's what's taking place here in this heavy heartache moment. That on that cross, not just Jesus dying, but our hope and dreams also. And so what do you do in this moment of arrival? It's that Jesus shows up and they don't even recognize him because they're still blocked because of what they hope for. So can we just all join in on the story for a minute here? Let's just kind of imagine that we're there in real time. What would we say to Jesus that we hope for in that moment? Maybe we would start like them and say, hey, Jesus, we had hoped, right? We had hoped that you were the one. We had hoped that you would make the difference. Maybe somebody here today might say, I hoped that I was going to graduate from college, I was going to get that job, and my life would be filled with purpose and meaning. Man, I hope for that to happen. Maybe you're here today and you're saying, man, I hoped that I was going to get that break. I hoped that I was going to get that opportunity. Man, I hoped I was going to get that promotion. And you know who got that promotion instead, right? Man, I'd hoped that you were going to heal that cancer, that it was going to stay in remission forever. And now it's back. God, I hoped that I would never fall back into that bad habit again. And I hoped that I wouldn't return to that sin again. I hoped that I wouldn't be stuck in this addiction again. And here I am, having to confess again the very sin I just asked for forgiveness from. I'd hoped that when I stood at that altar and we said I do, that it actually meant we were going to be married for a lifetime. I'd hoped. What have you prayed for? What have you hoped for? What have you worked for that hasn't turned out like you thought it was supposed to turn out? And what if that's keeping you from recognizing that God is right here, revealing himself to us right now, revealing himself to you right now? But will you see it? Will you see it?
I think another question we want to ask everyone today is, are you there right now? Are you there right now where you feel like hope is either fading or maybe hope is ended? In fact, maybe you're here today in this room, watching online, sitting in overflow somewhere because you're hoping even for a glimpse of hope. And see, we want you to know today that this story shows us that hope is not dead if Jesus is alive.
That's right.
And in fact, this story shows us that hope is not only available to you, but it is right walking next to you.
Yes.
That's available to you right now, right here, even in this place. Yes. And Jesus wants to reveal himself to you. So will you let hope in on this Easter? So whether you've been looking for Jesus or not, he's been looking for you. He's been pursuing you. And the second thing we think that Jesus reveals here in this passage today is that when you're lost, you don't need information, but you need revelation. You don't need more information, but you need revelation. Look how the story continues here in verse 25. Jesus said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. These followers really had hoped that Jesus was going to overthrow the Roman government. They had really hoped that he was going to lead some type of governmental or economical revolution inside Jerusalem. But see, Jesus didn't come to lead some type of social revolution. Instead, he came to bring a revelation that leads to a spiritual revolution. That's good. And that's even right here, just like in Luke chapter 24, three times when people have these interactions with the resurrected Lord, they're reminded of all these things that the Messiah did have to suffer. That he was going to go to the cross and pay the price for our sins so that we could have life. And in fact, here in this story, we see that the resurrection, it does bring new light and a revelation to who Jesus really is. And see, many of us, we come to church Easter after Easter after Easter. And see, we know the information. You know this story. But what you don't need today is more information. You need a revelation that Jesus wants to have a relationship with you.
Come on, is that good? That's good preaching. That's good. Man, get that sweat off your head, man. That's good preaching right
Gotta
there.
get it off of there.
Good Easter preaching.
And see, the thing is though that what Jesus is doing here too, as he's walking along with these two guys, he actually rebukes them a little bit. He says, how could you not know this? He pushes back on them and rebukes them, not because he's mad at them, but because he's madly in love with them. Because he doesn't want them to be led astray by a lie, but he wants them to find hope in the truth that only Jesus can give. And see, Jesus knew that only the truth would really set them free. And listen to how the story concludes here in verse 28. It says, as they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going farther. But they urged him strongly, stay with us, for it is nearly evening, and the day is almost over. So he went in to stay with them. And when he was at the table with them, he took bread, he gave thanks, he broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him. And then he disappeared from their sight. And then they asked each other, were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us? They got up and they returned at once to Jerusalem. They made their way back. There they found the 11 and those with them assembled together and saying, it is true. The Lord is risen and has appeared to Simon. Then the two told what had happened on the way and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread.
It's good. It's good. What this part of the story shows us is that you can hear something and not understand. That you can see something and not recognize. That something can be so close, it's right there in front of your face, and you still don't get it. Listen, this is not knowing things about Jesus. This is knowing Jesus. When you're lost, you don't need more information. You need a revelation. You need a relationship. It needs to move from your head all the way down to your heart. And in this moment, I believe there's something so powerful as we see this happening for them. Because see, here's the thing. Moses, the way God's revealed himself to us is through his word. In the Old Testament, Moses writes down the first 5 books of the Old Testament. The Jewish people would call that the Torah, the laws that God has for his people. In addition to that, the rest of the Old Testament is about the prophets. It's the law and the prophets give us over 300 prophecies that are going to get so specific to declare the coming Messiah. When he's going to be born, how he's going to die, and how he's going to be raised from the dead. Come on! They already knew all of this truth. They just didn't believe it yet to be real in their lives. And as I think about the tension of that for them, this information, they've got to realize that they are lost. And so here it is. Here's the reality of this whole thing, is that instead of Jesus getting angry and frustrated with them, what does he do? He comes up next to them and gives them a Bible study. Is that not good?
Oh, yeah.
And as they're walking along the road, talking about things, he begins to uncover it and says, guys, that head stuff now needs to move to the heart. It's time. But they can't see it. Why? Because they're lost. You know what I know about lost? You can be lost and not know it. Hello. But sometimes you can be lost and know it and don't even care. So if you think about it that way, you could be lost because of stubbornness or because of ignorance. Take your pick. But you're still lost nonetheless. You still need a guide to help you to find your way back. You know, as I was thinking about Easter weekend, and I knew you and I would be up here together, and a lot of times we share the flaws of our life, right? And we open up our lives about our marriage and our kids, and we share the mistakes so that we can get permission to talk about those things. And when I think about you and Anna, I've been so blessed having you guys move here and get on our team and be a part of our family. And I love watching y'all as parents. You've got an amazing family, 3 kids. And I don't know if y'all know this, they've been praying and preparing their home to adopt. And they believe that God's going to lead them to adopt another daughter to come into their home in this next year or so. We're praying with them. But as I watch you guys parent, I love seeing you guys with Micaiah.
Oh, yeah.
I love your Micaiah because when I see her, I see glimpses of my oldest daughter, Hannah. Because if I were to describe Hannah, she's now 21, but even when she was that age of Micaiah, 5, 6, 7 years of age, my daughter, Hannah, is fiercely independent. Come on, parents.
Yep.
You might have raised one like that.
Yep.
So fiercely independent that even as a young kid, I can do it, and I'm gonna show you I can do it. I'm gonna charge out front, and I'll tell you just a couple snapshots to kind of demonstrate this to you. She was the kind of kid that when she was young, she would never let you hold her hand. She didn't want that. So a lot of times, the only way you could have a hold of her is to hold her wrist. And that's how I did it. It was after one of our Easters, we first moved here. And like I said, I had all these kids, I had my 3 kids under the age of 6. And we decided after Easter to take a restful vacation to Florida. So we get in our minivan and we drive all the way down to Florida to rest at Universal Studios. Ha 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 ha, yeah. So here we are at this crowded theme park. It's hot, it's crowded. I got my 3 kids, and Hannah's wanting to run, and I'm grabbing her wrist, and we're walking around this park all day long at this theme park. Finally, at the end of the day, we're making our way to the exit, praise Jesus. We're almost there to the exit, and she realizes in her hand she's lost the purse that she's been carrying around all day at this theme park. Yeah, she lost it, and she really started to lost it right there. And everybody's watching us as we're beating our kid or something. She's screaming, and I'm realizing right now, if we've got to go retrace this whole theme park, every step, we've been around this park all day long. Where could this thing be? And I'm starting to think, but I'm thinking if I don't make some effort here, she's going to ruin the rest of our vacation. So I said, Pam, stay here with Sid and Lex. Let me go take Hannah. We're going to see if we can find this thing. Now we're going back to the park, in the park, and it's like a sea of humanity coming out of the park, right? It's like we're fishing upstream, right? We're trying to go. And what I realized in that moment of going through that crowd that day, something happened in that moment. Hannah, something she never does, she reached out and she grabbed my hand. Why? Because she knew she needed me. She needed my guidance, right? As we're working through this crowd of people, as we make our way back to Dr. Seuss land, and that last souvenir shop that we were in, we went in there, and sure enough, her purse was right where she left it. She clutched that purse in one hand, and she continued to hold my hand in the other. And we walked all the way back down to that exit that day. Now, why do I share that today, all these years removed? It's because this may be the reason why some of you don't have a relationship with God yet. Because you've never come to a place where you've reached out your hand in faith and said, Jesus, I need you. There's something you can do for me that can't happen any other way. You've never laid your life down to take the life of Jesus Christ. You've never said, God, your ways over my ways. And you have never trusted by faith to believe. And so you come Easter after Easter after Easter. You don't need more information today. You need a relationship today. Easter declares you need a relationship with Jesus. And what's happening right now in this moment is that Jesus is telling these 2 guys, guess what? The way back is not to familiar. The way back is to me. It's to Jesus. He is our way. He is our way. And so it's in this moment you wonder, what are these guys going to do now with what's just happened here in this moment? Will they trust Jesus?
Mm-hmm. You know, I was thinking about this part of the story and how the fact that these guys didn't need more information. I was thinking about how for 19 years, I got dressed up and I would go to church and I had all of the information. For 19 years, I went to church, and to no fault of my parents, but something was blocking me from seeing Jesus. And in fact, at age 19, I was going to the University of Central Florida and talking about hopes and goals and dreams. I graduated high school with a 3.8 GPA, and I had actually gotten a full ride scholarship to any school in the state of Florida. And not to mention some other scholarships as well that would cover books and some other college needs. Like I was going to go to college completely and totally for free. And so I went to the University of Central Florida with plans to become a medical doctor. It was my hope and my dream to become a doctor. I was in the medical club even in high school. And so I was registered pre-med, studying biology. The problem is that my first year at UCF, I was living the life that everyone says that you should live when you become a college student. And I literally would party until the break of dawn. I sometimes wouldn't get home to 5 or 6 a.m. in the morning. I would go to clubs. I would go to beer drinking parties, weed smoking parties, hanging out with friends and all that stuff. You guys are cheering a little bit too loud right here. Let's pray over this section. Anyway, so I was doing all these things, and the thing is, as I was doing that, I would skip all of my morning classes. I wouldn't do any of my homework. And after my first year at the University of Central Florida, my once stellar GPA, and don't judge me on this, but my once stellar GPA went down to a 1.8. And see, the thing is, I improved on it next semester by continuing to squander all of that away, and I took it down to a 1.3 my second year at UCF. And see, I was starting to look at how this once great hope and dream I had to become a doctor was fading away. Not to mention, on top of that, I was living this life again that everyone said that you should live. And I was on the outside, I was like, whoa, this is great. But on the inside, I was so discouraged at the person I was becoming. I was disappointed in myself. And I also treated people so terribly. I really didn't make life all about me. And if someone couldn't give me something I wanted, I treated people as if they were trophies to be won or tools to be used. And if you couldn't give me what I wanted, I would dismiss you out of my life. In fact, I would cheat in school, which obviously didn't help at all. I stole from people. I was so discouraged at the person that I was ultimately becoming, because I know my parents didn't want that for me. I didn't want that for me. And even though on the outside everything looked great, on the inside I was losing hope. But I had one Christian friend. There was one day that Christian friend, he invited me in to hear the story about Jesus again. And he proceeded to tell me that God loved me. He proceeded to tell me that even though it may look like I'm heading toward a terrible ending, I can't change the past, but with Jesus, he can give me a new ending. He can give me a new beginning right then and right there. And as I was listening to him talk, he was saying that, it's not, you don't earn the favor of God. You don't earn a trip to heaven by simply trying to do more good and less bad. But it's believing the Easter story, that Christ Jesus died for sinners, of which I was one of the worst ones. But he died, he was buried, and he rose again so we could have that forgiveness and that eternal life. And I didn't tell him this at the time, but as he was telling me the gospel again, I'd heard this information so many times, but it's like God was giving me a revelation to who he was, that he wanted a relationship with me, and my heart was starting to burn on the inside. But I got up and I left, and I said, man, I've heard that before. I don't really need that, but I knew I needed Jesus. And as quickly as I could, I surrendered my life to him, and I had no choice but to invite Jesus in.
That's good. So the moral of this story is, and you get a 1.3, you can't become a doctor. You become a pastor. No. This right here is the most important point of the whole message, and we don't want you to miss this. Number 3 is this: Jesus always enters in where he's been invited.
That's right.
Is that true? Is that true for somebody today? Jesus always enters where he has been invited in. Some of you are nodding with me because you know that personally. That's true. It's true. What I love about the story is they don't even recognize it's Jesus, but they say, hey, don't stay out here in the dark. It's dangerous. Come into our home. Come in. And what does Jesus do? He comes into their home. And while he's in their home, they say, hey, come and eat at our table. They sit down to eat at the table. And even though Jesus is a guest, what does he do? He picks up the bread like he's the host. He blesses it. He breaks the bread. And then he begins to hand the bread, right, to the people there with him, those 2 guys there that day. Now, it doesn't say it here in this account, but it does in some other resurrection accounts. But when he holds out the bread, I just wonder if they looked down and they saw the nail scars in his hands. And I wonder in that moment when their eyes were open and they see that it's Jesus, that they're reminded of, oh yeah, Jesus said, my body will be broken, my blood will be poured out so that I can die and rise again so that you can rise and live. And in that moment of seeing Jesus in their house and seeing the marks of Calvary on his body, it opened their eyes and immediately he disappeared. Now we know that they got it, don't we? Because what do they do next? It's nighttime, but that doesn't stop them from getting up immediately and going 7 more miles back to meet up with the disciples. They get it. They get it. And maybe as we look here today at this page of Scripture today, do you get it? Do we get it? Do we see that he's been looking for us all along?
Mm-hmm. You know, there's something about Easter that really does call us back, to find our way back. And maybe for some of you, Easter calls you to find your way back to family and friends, and maybe you haven't seen in a year. But there's something about Easter where it's almost like God is calling us to re-examine this story. God is calling us to understand once again just how much he loves you, and he cares about you, and he wants what's best for you. And it's so easy in our world with everything we see happening, everything from racial tension to governmental tension to school shootings. Like it's so easy for us to become so discouraged and so hopeless. But we need more Easter in our lives.
That's right. That's right. You know, as I was thinking about even this moment here and this weekend, Jesus always comes in to where he's been invited. I think about what we've been praying for, what we've been longing for in this whole way back, and what could God do this weekend in us. But it really does come back to a surrender, doesn't it? Are we willing to surrender? To surrender our excuses, to surrender our regrets, to surrender our sin, to surrender our pain and our shame. Will we trust Jesus? Will we trust Jesus? Or is this just going to be an Easter tradition? Oh yeah, we all go to church as a family. Easter tradition, check. Move on to the next one. Or is today going to be about a revelation, a relationship? You know, pastors, we think about this moment. I know you and I have been praying a lot. What have you prayed for today to happen?
You know, as I've been praying for this particular day, I was thinking about how it was 19 years, 19 Easters without Jesus in it. I got dressed up and I went to church and I had all of the information, but I didn't have the revelations to who Jesus really is. And it's been my prayer that maybe for some of you, like maybe this is your second Easter, maybe this is your 19th Easter. My prayer is that you would realize that even if you haven't been looking for Jesus, he has been looking for you. And that today it would move from just up here having the information, but to a revelation that Jesus is warming your heart and that he wants to have this relationship with you. It's been my prayer that you would experience the forgiveness that only Jesus could bring. Because maybe, and I gave you guys the PG version of my life story, but man, God has forgiven me of so much, and he has renewed me. He has made me brand new. In fact, my heart still burns for him today. And that's the same hope and forgiveness that I want you to experience today. In fact, I was thinking, Pastor, as this is not, I had 19 years of Easter without knowing Jesus, and I just turned 38 this year, even though it looks like I'm 25 years old. I just turned 38 this year, and this makes 19 Easters that I have known Jesus. And there's something about the first Easter. Thank you guys. But see, I'll never forget the first Easter when I gave my life to him and how these songs came alive. And again, when it looks like my life was heading toward a terrible end, man, Jesus gave me a new direction. That I realized he had been walking along the road with me all along. And there's something about that I want you to experience today.
It's good. So the question is, are you a Christian? Or did God create this whole service to reach you right here in this moment? Will you have enough courage to invite him into your life? You know, we're going to do something different this hour that I haven't done all 6 services, and I hate doing this, but I like doing this because it's going to push you a little bit. You know what? I've been the one that's been the one to invite people to pray with me and to pray words with me. And today, Pastor, I just feel like right now in this service, because you got so vulnerable in your story, you're the one that's supposed to call people to join you and to begin a relationship with Jesus. I was 14 years old when I first heard that good news message, and my heart's burning still all these years removed, knowing what Jesus Christ has done for me. And I believe God brought somebody here today on this campus, whether you're sitting in this room or on our campus somewhere else or even online, and right now is your moment. And I want Pastor to lead us right now in this moment. So lead us, Pastor.
Come on, let's go ahead and bow your heads and close your eyes. If you're watching online, man, I want you to know that right now, all of this has been done for you. Even this Easter story points to the fact that Jesus was willing to lay down his life for you. And maybe you felt like you were so far gone that he could never love you. Maybe you doubt as to whether Jesus would ever accept you. This story shows us that the answer to that is yes. And maybe your heart's been beating fast. Maybe your heart's been burning on the inside. And maybe it's time for you to surrender your life to Christ. And I'm going to lead you in a prayer right there where you are. Even if you're in overflow or watching online, would you pray these words right where you are? And these words aren't magical words, but these are real words that we're helping you to communicate to God. So right where you are, would you pray, Father, today, surrendering my life to you. Jesus, my heart is burning on the inside for you. Jesus, would you forgive me of my past? Jesus, would you forgive me of my sin? Today, God, I make you the Lord and leader of my life. And while everyone still has their heads down, their eyes closed, if you prayed that prayer to ask Jesus to be the Lord and leader of your life, in a moment I'm going to count to 3. And when I count to 3, I want you to send your hand up straight in the air to declare that today, I know that Jesus has been looking for me, and today I'm giving my life to him. And that's you. You're ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Going to shoot your hand up, straight up in the air. Keep it up high. Our prayer team is going to make their way around to you, and they're going to give you a Bible just to say, man, we're celebrating with you today. So keep your hand up as they make their way around. If you're watching online, you can click the button right below me that says that you raised your hand and you made a decision today. And Father, I just want to thank you, God, for what you're doing in this place. I want to thank you, God, for the story of Easter. And God, there's something about it that does want to bring us back to you, to your forgiveness, to your hope, to a relationship that's only found in you. So today, God, we thank you that always, God, even when we're not looking for you, you've been looking for us. God, we praise you. We celebrate you. In Jesus' name, amen.